Good morning and welcome to our self-compassion workshop. We are going to be looking today about how we can start to look after ourselves during what is a really challenging time at the moment. To introduce ourselves, my name's Catherine and I'm a CBT therapist working for Talking Change in Portsmouth, and I'll hand you over to my colleague Ruth.
Oh, hello, my name's Ruth and I'm a counsellor at Talking Change.
So this workshop is going to be made up of several different sections that are pre-recorded so that you can listen to them at any time. Today we're going to be focusing on what is compassion and what we mean by compassion and what we mean by self-compassion, and think about some of the things that might get in the way of us being compassionate to ourselves or others. The other sections are going to be looking at understanding how our mind and body works, particularly in difficult times, thinking about what we can do about this, and introducing some skills to help you better manage difficult emotions, and then actually think about when and how we might use these skills. At the end of the presentation, there's going to be a list of links and resources that you can tap into if you feel that they might be helpful. Moving on. So the aim of our session today is, as you said, to provide some self-compassion skills and techniques to help maintain our well-being in the challenging times that we're being faced with at the moment. So to start off, if we just have a think about what is compassion. So looking at the pictures that we see in front of ourselves, I'd just like you just to take a few minutes just to think about the words that come to mind when you see these different pictures. Some of the words that people have used before are kindness, caring, understanding, happiness, togetherness, loyalty. So we often have a good understanding about what compassion means and how to be compassionate to others. And actually during this pandemic, a lot of people have been praised for the compassion that they've displayed to other people, whether that be the nurses, doctors, carers, on the front line working in medical or other care settings, whether that be the postman, the dustman, the supermarket workers, the teachers teaching in school or supported from home, the parents homeschooling whilst also trying to work, to name but a few. So actually a lot of people have been able to step up and demonstrate these levels of compassion, but it hasn't always been easy. That itself comes with challenges. But what is it that we're doing when we're being compassionate? So when we're being compassionate, we are doing two things. We are recognizing that other people are struggling and suffering, and we're trying to do something to understand the cause of that suffering, and actually we're motivated to try and make things better, to alleviate the suffering that's going on. So the most common definition of compassion is actually being moved by the suffering of oneself and others and being motivated to reduce that suffering. So that openness and sensitivity, we care that other people or ourselves are suffering, and we've also got that motivation to reduce it, to help ourselves or other people feel better. As we've seen in this pandemic, we're often okay or good at being compassionate towards other people, but I just wonder how often we have applied any of these to ourselves during this time. How often have we spoken to ourselves with that kindness, that caring, that understanding? How often have we taken that advice that we've given to friends who have reached out for us? So compassion is a very different way to dealing with suffering and emotional pain compared to what we might be used to. So in society, we're often given certain messages that are up here on the screen. We're often given the messages that hurting or in pain means that there's something wrong with us. So we might find ourselves having the thought, my body hurts after a long shift, so I must be unfit or not up to the job. If we're having a hard time, we often blame ourselves or blame other people, and that kind of just deal with it, you know, pull yourself together, get over it. I should be able to cope. Everyone else is dealing better. So we take a lot of responsibility. And again, it's those messages that actually I shouldn't be feeling the way that I'm feeling. If we be experiencing emotions such as that sadness, that fear, anxiety, worry, whatever that emotion is for us, it means that actually we are weak in some way, and actually that we don't deserve sympathy or pity. So showing emotion will mean that I'm not coping. Again, there's something wrong with us for feeling the way that we're feeling. And then when life difficulties come up, actually it's that tough it out, get through it without having any difficulty. You know, this is what I'm paid to do. This is what I'm trained to do. I just have to get on with it. They're all sort of typical messages that society can give to us. So actually, how do we take a compassionate approach, particularly during this pandemic? So life as we know it has changed and is full of uncertainty. Our routines have been pulled apart. You know, the things that we usually can do, we might not be able to do, or they might be restricted at the moment. Many of us are struggling with life at home, life at work, what we're seeing and hearing in the media. There's a constant message of threat that's out there. And actually our bodies and our brains, when we sense threat, actually that's when the adrenaline and the flight or fight response kicks in, and that's instinctive. And you know, we're all experiencing a whole range of emotions, from pain, fear, sadness, anger, loss, brokenheartedness. But actually these things aren't a sign of weakness, but they are normal human experiences that actually we're all experiencing at the moment. And it's about recognizing that actually, do you know what? It's okay to feel all of these things. It's okay to be struggling in times of such uncertainty. So actually, do you know what? It's okay to not be okay. It is okay to be scared. It is okay to be finding it hard to make decisions about knowing what the right thing to do is for you and your family. It's okay to be sad about the things that you miss, the things that you've lost. It's okay to enjoy yourself and forget all about the pandemic for a bit. And actually, it's then okay to feel guilty about the fact that you did that. So it's thinking about actually, you know, we are all in this together. You're not working from home. You're at home during a crisis trying to work. You're not homeschooling, you're crisis schooling. And we're not all in the same boat, but we're all in the same storm. So your journey is going to be different to everybody's. And what you need to do to look after yourself is okay. And that might be the same, and that might be different from other people. So handing over to Ruth to have a think about the qualities of compassion.
Yes, so now we're going to have a look at compassion in a bit more detail. First of all, we're going to have a look at some of the attributes of compassion. So just to bring up those, compassion requires us to be sensitive to feelings and what's going on around us, to have sympathy, to care for the well-being, to manage and tolerate distress and pain, not to be judgmental, and to have empathy. And in this, we describe that this all has to come from the right place in us. So it needs to come from a place of warmth from your heart. So I just want you to think for one moment about a time when you've been compassionate towards somebody. And just take a moment to think about what was happening for them and how did you feel? And just see if you can connect with that feeling that you had towards them, and just notice where you feel that. And so that place you're feeling it is the place it needs to come from. And to recognize that actually, if we're not being compassionate and we can't come from that place, that's okay as well, that we can't always feel that towards what's going on around us. So just to move on, we're going to have a look now a little bit more of some of the qualities of compassion. And so as Catherine said before, that compassion requires strength. It's a difficult thing to do. It's not just about being nice to people. And it's about staying with difficult things rather than avoiding them. We need to have wisdom, so we need to know what is right, and to know what's needed. And that isn't always easy because it might not be what we want or what other people want, but it's what's necessary that's important. Compassion always is infused with kindness and warmth, and it's really important that we're not judgmental, because as soon as we become judgmental, then it brings up feelings of shame, and shame is really toxic to our brain. It doesn't help us to think clearly, and so in compassion, we always want to make sure that we're not shaming others or shaming ourselves. And so moving on, what we're going to have a look at now is what it looks like when we and others are not being compassionate, and what it will look like when we are being compassionate, just to give you a flavour of this. So first of all, not being compassionate. And so this involves the desire to punish and condemn, and we're often looking backwards at the past. It might be that we're focusing on our disappointments, how we've been let down, what other people have done wrong, and it's always looking at what's missing and what the deficit is. This brings up the emotions of anger, frustration, anxiety, contempt, disgust. And sometimes that can feel like one big ball of feelings where we can't really separate out each feeling. And then thing to consider is the example of a critical teacher who's talking to a child who's struggling in the class, and to draw on the experience of either you being on the receiving end of that or witnessing that in the classroom, to think about how we speak to people really harshly when we're not being compassionate with them. So just want you to take a moment and just notice how often recently you might have felt like this. And just to notice that this is really normal for us not to feel like this, and particularly when we're under threat, our brain automatically finds it difficult to be compassionate, and that's just part of being human, to be like this sometimes. On the other side, if we have a look at what it is to be compassionate, it's the desire to improve, be at our best, and to encourage others. We have a sense of the future when we're being compassionate. We're looking forward. It's about building on positives and abilities rather than focusing on the mistakes and what's wrong. And it's about validating, if we do make a mistake, that we're just human, and we encourage ourselves and others to keep going, learn a lesson from it, or decide what we need to do to heal things. An example of that is imagining the compassionate teacher who's talking to a child who's struggling. Just imagine how they would talk to them. Okay, so moving on, what we're going to have a look at in the next slide is looking at self-compassion. So we've talked about the qualities and thought about how we're compassionate to other people. But in times of stress and when we're not being compassionate to others, often it shows that we are finding self-compassion difficult. And so the important place to focus is on ourselves first of all. And this list tells us the things that are needed for self-compassion. So as I read them out to you, I'd encourage you to just tune in to what does that feel like. And if you notice a reaction to any of these, then just to note them for yourself. Maybe you'll come back to this slide later on and go through it again. Because the ones that we find difficult will be the things that trip us up when we're trying to be self-compassionate. And if we know that they're there, then that makes it much easier then to start addressing that. So the first thing we need to do is notice our needs. And that means looking at things like noticing you're hungry or thirsty, noticing how you're feeling, If you're the sort of person that goes through the day and you haven't eaten all day and you haven't even been hungry, then you might have trouble noticing what your needs are. And so if you recognize this, some things you might want to do is to keep a reflective journal for yourself, just to notice how you're feeling, what's going on, what your thoughts are, just somewhere to put things down and take them out of your head, and just to notice. Help you to start a healthy conversation with yourself about your feelings and your needs. Once we've noticed what we need, then the next step is we need to start caring for ourselves. So what do we need to do for ourselves? And if we can't manage that, what help might we need and who can help us with it? Nurturing ourselves is slightly different to caring. So once we've taken care of our basic needs, the next step is about growth, and nurturing is about encouraging yourself to grow. So that might be nurturing a hobby, something that you're really passionate about or enjoy. It might be about learning new skills. So by watching our workshop today, you're already nurturing yourself. Forgiving ourselves when we've made mistakes is really important, but sometimes really difficult. And so rather than thinking that by beating ourselves up, we're going to be less likely to make that mistake again, in fact, it's the opposite. And if you can forgive yourselves, you're much less likely to keep repeating the same mistakes. Being able to accept kindness from others is a part of self-compassion. So if you find it difficult to accept help from others, then that's something that you might need to try and improve on. So if you struggle to take up a compliment well, and you brush off compliments from other people, just remember what it feels like when somebody brushes off a compliment that you give to them. And that if people do that to us, it doesn't mean that they don't like us or they don't want to be close to us. It might mean that they're struggling to accept that for themselves. So knowledge and wisdom are important. And again, you have a whole life experience and knowledge and wisdom to draw on that you've learnt. And again, today, you're going to learn a little bit more about human behaviour, hopefully. Owning what's our responsibility and what's not is really important. So recognizing that we can't live other people's lives for them, we can't change them, and actually we're not responsible for their feelings. So we can't make people angry with us. We might do something they don't like, but whether they respond in an angry way depends on their personality. It might be that they're having a bad day. It might be something that we've said that's triggered painful memories about the past. But we have to allow other people to take responsibility for their own feelings and actions. Being content and liking who we are. So not wanting to change who we are. We might decide to change our behavior or change our thinking. But essentially, knowing that we're valued and okay as we are as a person is really important. When we're distressed, we also need to find out how to alleviate the distress. So what do we do in that moment to make it better? And we're going to give you some tools to do that later on in the workshop as well. And from all of this, when you build self-compassion, then we know that we are not alone. So even if you're in a big crowded room and you feel very lonely, that's often because we're not there for ourselves. And self-compassion will mean that we'll have that feeling less often. So we're going to move on next and just have a look at when we're not being compassionate, what this looks like. So this list describes the sort of things we're doing, probably when we're really stressed. So the first thing to do is if you notice that you're doing these things, so criticizing and beating yourself up, not valuing yourself equally to other people, blaming yourself, punishing yourself in ways such as not eating, sleeping, maybe self-medicating with drugs or alcohol, overworking yourself, having some traits of OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder, needing to get things right and needing to check, or possibly self-harm. If we're always going over the things that we did wrong and looking to the past, not putting our needs first, because I think being self-indulgent, not doing things that allow us to get better and improve, not recognizing that we're equal and worthy, being judgmental, and allowing others to have control over us. All of these things show that we're probably quite stressed. And actually, rather than thinking we need to do these things to improve, perhaps we need to just recognize where the stress is coming from and focus more on being self-compassionate when we're doing these things instead. So I'd encourage you to come back and have a look at this list as well, and just recognize those that perhaps you do more often, and just recognize that these are your ways of coping with stress, and they're just the less helpful ways of coping with stress, and we can learn to do it differently. So moving on next, I'm going to hand you back to Catherine to have a look at why compassion is so difficult sometimes.
Thanks, Ray. So we've spoken a lot this morning about what is compassion, what it looks like, what it's not, but actually it can be really hard to do, especially when we're asking us to be compassionate towards ourselves. So I invite you just to take a moment to have a think of actually what are you scared of? What are you worried will happen if you actually start to be more compassionate towards yourself? So some of the barriers that seem to get in the way for a lot of people, these are the common ones that come up for us when we're working with our clients, are that it's okay for others, but I don't deserve it. So it's okay for me to give it to other people, but it's not something that I deserve to have myself. Compassion is like wallowing in your own self-pity. So it's feeling sorry for yourself. Compassion is selfish and indulgent. Being compassionate lets me off the hook and means I don't have to take responsibility for anything in my life. So it's the easy option. Compassion is for weaklings or wusses. Compassion makes you vulnerable to people who take advantage of you. So these are all typical barriers that come up for us when we are trying to be kind to ourselves. So I'd like to invite you for a moment just to have a think about any of these that particularly resonate with you, any ones that you can really notice that you perhaps find yourself saying to yourself. Other thoughts that have come up that are linked to these is I don't have time to think of myself. I'll be letting people down. People need me. I won't be working as hard as others. And all of them keep us functioning in that stress mode, that uncompassionate way of being that we've described in the previous slide. So how do we overcome some of these barriers? So it's helpful for us to have a think about actually how helpful and how accurate some of these thoughts are for us. So actually compassionate is the soft option. If we have a think back to some of those qualities that we were talking about, the strength, the wisdom, the understanding, how many of those would we actually describe as soft? You know, it requires courage, strength, both physical and mental strength, and wisdom. Actually, compassion often means facing what we're most afraid of, doing the most difficult thing. And actually, sometimes that is going to cause us a lot of pain in terms of the memories and the thoughts and the feelings that generates, which doesn't strike me as being particularly an easy option. So compassion is the same as pity. Often we associate pity with kind of being superior, so being above somebody else. But actually compassion is about being moved by our own or others' distress. It's about being equal, that actually we're all the same, we all have the same rights, we're all human, we're all living in this world, we're all struggling in different ways, and we're all doing whatever we can to cope. So we're all on a par. Actually, we're not looking down at ourselves, we're not looking down at others, we're just all doing what we can do at the moment to get through. So needing compassion makes us weak. We often have those double standards. I wonder how often you have looked at other people that you're being compassionate towards and been thinking that they're weak for needing the help or the compassion, the care that you're giving them. So often we have that double standard. We wouldn't think that of somebody else, but actually we're very quick to judge ourselves for needing that compassion. And that compassion is easy. Well, I think if we just, take a moment to reflect on everything that's involved in compassion, all of the qualities and the skills that it needs, all the things that we need to be able to do, actually, none of that is particularly easy. It's really hard and it takes practice. And if we think about it in terms of COVID-19, whether we are shielding, self-isolating, social distancing to protect ourselves and others, whether we're putting ourselves forward and facing our anxieties and going out there on the front line, being exposed to the virus, tolerating all the anxiety that is in the world at the moment, trying to make those decisions for our children, for our families, for our workplace. Actually, in the process of doing all of that, we are demonstrating strength. We're demonstrating wisdom. Like, we're gathering all of the information, we're getting a good understanding, we're being kind to others and ourselves. We're approaching this all with that warmth and being non-judgmental. And I wonder what about the current situation, everything we're doing is selfish or self-indulgent or easy, because it has certainly been really challenging. We're following the government guidelines, we're all taking responsibility for the things that we do, so nobody is being let off the hook. And sometimes actually being compassionate is doing what you know is right, but it's actually the hardest thing to do, and it can take a lot of courage. And actually, we are facing those difficulties is often a lot harder than ignoring and avoiding them, especially in the short term. So that brings us to the end of this part of our workshop. We hope you've enjoyed listening to our introduction. Our next workshop is going to be about, now that we know a bit more about what we mean by compassion, actually let's learn about how we might do that and introduce some skills to help you with that. Good morning and welcome back to our compassion workshop. So in our last section, we looked a bit about introducing compassion, what we mean by compassion, what we mean by self-compassion, and what gets in the way. So today we're going to have a little bit more of a look at how and when do we need to be compassionate to ourselves. And so in order to do that, we're going to start off by having a think about how humans manage emotions. So the slide that you can see up in front of you shows that we have 3 different emotional regulation systems in our body. So we have the threat system down the bottom in red. And so the threat system is the one that is danger, danger, danger. So it helps detect, track and respond to things that threaten us. And it's associated with feelings such as anger, shame, anxiety. And it's in terms of hormones and chemicals in the body, it's associated with adrenaline and cortisol. So it's often the flight or fight mode that we know that a lot of us are very familiar with. And the threat system works in a better safe than sorry mode. So it's, from an evolutionary perspective, actually any hesitation would have, when we're faced with a lion or a saber-toothed tiger, would have meant that we would have got eaten. So actually this is a really basic evolutionary system that exists in the body. The drive system is associated with dopamine, and it's more our kind of go, 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 go. So it is about stimulating and detecting kind of desires. So we achieve good things. We've got a sense of purpose. It's very sort of goal orientated. And it's what gets us engaged with kind of our hobbies, with work, with socializing. And then we've got the green system here, which is our soothing system. So our soothing system is associated with oxytocin, and it's that kind of warm feeling that you might get right inside you. and it's linked to feelings of safeness, connectedness, peacefulness, relax. And actually it helps to regulate the other two systems so that we're not constantly go, 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 or we're not constantly running away from threat. It's about slowing down and making us be in a better place to be able to problem solve and make decisions about things. So the threat system is very much is self-activated. It's a survival mechanism, whereas the drive and the soothing system tend to need to be a bit more kind of nurtured and tended. We need to learn how to do them, effort to maintain them, so that they work for us. So these three systems are about they define our mindset. They define how we interpret situations. And so actually we can therefore use these three systems to determine how we then respond to certain situations. So I'm just going to share with you a video done by a psychologist, which actually demonstrates really well these three systems and also how they may be affected during COVID-19. So it is a video by Teresa Darn from South Warwickshire NHS Foundation Trust. And so if you bear me one moment, I will just share that with you.
Hi, my name is Teresa Darn. I'm one of the psychologists in the Warwick Clinical Psychology Department. And I'd like to talk to you about difficult feelings and how we can better understand and manage them. Neuroscience suggests that we have three main emotion systems. We can represent these with three circles. The first one is threat. This is like our brain's alarm system. It alerts us when we're in danger. So when you feel a surge of fear when you see a lorry veering down the road at you, or when you feel angry if someone's treated you unfairly, or when you feel disgust when you notice the apple you're about to bite into is rotten, that's your threat system working. It operates on a better safe than sorry principle. From your threat system's perspective, it's doing its job if it alerts you to danger 10 times, but on only one occasion was there a real threat. If we think about the world our ancestors evolved in, the ones that hesitated just a moment to see if that lion really was about to eat them probably wouldn't have made it. Another important thing to know about our threat systems is that because we are a social species, living in a group and being accepted by others is crucial to our survival. Think back again to our ancestors living in the savannah. Being cast out by the group would have been a direct threat to that individual's survival. So our threat systems are also on the lookout for any signs that we might be rejected or otherwise shunned from our social group. The threat system is associated with body chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol, our stress hormones. The natural responses the threat system triggers are instincts to fight, flight, or freeze. The next system to think about is our drive system. This is our get up and go, pleasure-based system that gives us a sense of reward and excitement when we do something fun or achieve an important goal. Often people's drive system is activated by things like enjoying work, doing sports, engaging in hobbies, going to the theatre or cinema, or going to parties with friends. The drive system is associated with dopamine, our brain signal for reward. The final system is the soothe system. This is also a pleasure-based system, but is more focused on a feeling of slowing down, contentment, feeling safe, and social connectedness. This system is highly associated with being around others that we love and trust, but also anything that can help our minds slow down, such as yoga, physical touch like hugs or massages, taking a bath, meditation, and being around pets. The soothe system is associated with oxytocin, which is the hormone of positive feelings like love and bonding. It's also associated with being better able to problem solve and make decisions. Now, you might have guessed that the threat system is very good at being activated all by itself and will quite happily alert us to any possible threats that may or may not actually harm us. The drive and soothe systems, however, need to be tended and nurtured, a bit like a garden. We have to put some effort into their upkeep, and the three systems overall work best when they're balanced. This is because the two pleasure systems, especially soothe, can work to calm down feelings of threat. Physiologically, the soothe system acts like a brake on threats. We can imagine that the threat system is like a bike speeding down a hill, and the soothe system is the handbrake. Now, what about everything we're going through now? Well, our threat systems are unsurprisingly feeling rather overactivated now. There have been lots of scary headlines for months, and now the reality is finally and undeniably hitting home. These are lots of fears that our threat system cannot easily resolve because we don't know what the future will look like, and we need to be careful around other people now, which is really unpleasant for a social species. Add to this, and our usual ways of managing threat through drive and soothe have now severely been restricted. Things we do for pleasure, like going to the gym, out for dinner, or just out at all, are now off limits. We may not have as much time or the headspace to be doing things for fun as we juggle working from a home with children in it or extra long shifts with increasingly overwhelming demands. Likewise, our easiest way of activating physical proximity with others is now against the law, and it may feel frivolous to take time for yourself by doing something calming, like taking a bath. This leaves our system in a rather dire situation. What can we do about this? Acknowledge feelings of threat, but try not to let them run the show. They are real feelings, and they're telling us something important. It's okay to feel upset, frightened, angry, and tearful. But do try to notice where your threat mind is taking you. Are you getting caught up in lots of worries about the future or regrets about the past? This is probably less helpful to what you may need to do in the present moment. One trick is to thank your threat system for its help. Thank you, threat mind, for pointing this out to me. But now I'm going to turn down your volume and bring yourself back to the present moment using a grounding technique, such as connecting with your senses. What are three things that you can see, hear, or touch right now? Notice how your body feels in this moment with your feet firmly on the floor and your back in an upright position. Remember that the soothe system acts as a brake on threat. It's not just something lovely to do when you have the time. Although this might feel insignificant in the face of all the threats facing us right now, the power of the breath in regulating our system is really incredible. The trick is to breathe rhythmically, so evenly and smoothly. Counting can be helpful. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the in-breath, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the out-breath, with a little pause at the end if that feels right for you. Everyone has a different rhythm and rate that feels soothing for them. So experiment during a calm moment for practice to find out what works for you. 2 minutes of rhythmic breathing can do wonders for calming your body and brain and will allow you to think more clearly in that moment. There are some free apps that can help, for example, iBreathe and the breathing app. What's important to remember is that while soothe regulates threat, it does not make threat go away, but it does allow you to get into the mindset where you can better make decisions and problem solve what you need to do in that moment to manage that threat. So yes, soothing rhythmic breathing will not in itself resolve anything, but perhaps you will be better able to work out what can help in that moment after you've used it for a few minutes. We do need to distance ourselves from others, but that's only physically. Let's find ways to socially connect even while keeping ourselves safe. Can you have a FaceTime dinner party or a Zoom brunch? Can grandparents read books to the children over Skype? Find ways of staying emotionally connected with friends and family now that we cannot see each other. And remember to also talk about things other than how frightening coronavirus is. Perhaps sharing how you've been coping or what you were proud of. And in a safe way, try to find things you can do for fun. Explore how you can have fun and feel a sense of achievement at home. Are there games at home that you haven't played in a long time, or a hobby that you've been neglecting? This one may be a tricky one to foster at the moment, but please don't forget it. Make the most of your one outdoor activity per day. Our bodies store those feelings of threat, so releasing them through exercise is really important, as is generally looking after our bodies by eating regularly and sleeping enough too. Our brains do a huge amount of emotional processing at night. The best gift you can give yourself is enough sleep, at least 8 hours. So I hope this has given you some ideas about how our emotions work normally and some of the ways that they might be dysregulated now, as well as some thoughts for rebalancing them. Remember, you're doing an amazing job in this season. And I hope this will help you in taking small steps day by day to look after your emotional health.
So I hope you found that that clip helpful. Ruth and myself are going to pick up and go through some of the techniques that she talked about. So the grounding techniques with your senses and the soothing rhythm breathing in more detail later in this workshop. So what we're trying to do is thinking about actually what we need these systems to be able to be as balanced as we can be and to be able to move between the systems in order for us to deal with life challenges. So let's have a think about where we might be at the moment. So what does this threat mode look like at the moment with COVID-19? So if we are to split up what's going on for us into what we call sort of a hot cross bun or a vicious cycle, how we're feeling at the moment is made up of a whole load of thoughts. I don't know how long I can do this for, the what if, have I got it, am I going to spread it to others, I want to see my family, I don't know what to do with myself, what are the right decisions to be making, have I made the right choices, and there's probably a whole load of what ifs because of the uncertainty and the fact that there seem to be very few answers out there at the moment. So when we're having these sort of thoughts are going through our head, we might notice that actually having those thoughts is making us feel quite tired, feeling sick, those typical flight or fight responses that we get from the adrenaline pumping around our body, so a tight chest, muscle tension, dry mouth, chest pain, heart pain. Those feelings can be linked, physical feelings can be linked with emotions such as being anxious, overwhelmed, worry, dread, low mood, scared, stressed, panic. So we've got some anxiety feelings in there, but we've got some low mood feelings in there as well. There might also be feelings of guilt. There might also be feelings of shame, perhaps, if actually for whatever reason we haven't been able to stick to the restrictions that we've been advised to be following. And actually, when we're having all of these thoughts, we've got all of these physical and emotional feelings. Actually, as humans, what we try and do is do something to get rid of those feelings. And we want to get rid of those feelings and thoughts as quick as we possibly can. So we might withdraw, isolate ourselves. We might snap and shout, avoid certain people, certain situations, certain conversations. We might find it hard to concentrate. We'll have changes in our sleep pattern, changes in our appetite, might have difficulties making decisions. And while some of these, such as the withdraw, the snap, shout, avoid, in the short term, they might give us a sense of relief. Actually, in the longer term, they can generate more of these thoughts and feelings. And similarly, with a lot of the other behaviours, when we're finding that we're having trouble concentrating, we might find that we're having more what if thoughts. You might find that we're having very critical thoughts about the fact that we're not able to concentrate. And that generates more of these physical reactions of physical feelings. So as we can see, we've got an awful lot going on, and actually they're all interconnected. So the way that we're feeling is affecting the way that we're thinking, the things that we're doing. The things that we're doing are affecting the things that we're thinking and feeling. So it all becomes one vicious cycle that actually we get caught up in, going round and round. So what we want to have a think about today as we're moving on is actually, how do we break this vicious cycle? How do we break this vicious cycle and get out of that threat zone and move into more of a soothing, calm, connected zone? So I'm going to hand over to Ruth, who's going to talk about this a little bit more.
Okay, so just to summarise really and recognise how in the current situation with COVID-19, why this is bringing about so much stress for us. And so this breaks down the causes of stress into 4 different areas, and it's just helpful to remind ourselves that this situation And a lot of the things that we're coming across are new. This is novel. So everything has changed in our lives, our home life, work life, when we're out, how we need to behave, how we shop. All of these are new things we're experiencing. So it's really normal to be stressed by them. There's also a lot of unpredictability around at the moment. We don't know when things are going to change again in terms of when we're going to be free to do things again. There's a lot of unpredictability when we're out, of what's going to happen when we're out. How do we keep our distance from people? And again, thoughts about, will I catch it? What will we do if we do? And again, we talked before a lot about threat. And so COVID-19 brings about threat not just to us physically in terms of our health, but there's been a threat to our lives financially. And also personally, it's made us all question whether we have the resources to cope at the moment, and that can feel like a threat to us personally as well. And finally, we all need a sense of control. And at the moment, we're being asked to follow rules that we have no control over the say in those. We have no control over the virus at all. And so it's about focusing on the parts that we can control. And we're going to help you to deal with each of these things as well in the next part of this with some practical tips. So I'm going to hand you back to Kat to have a look at one of the basic things that we can all start to do to help manage our stress better.
Thanks, Ruth. So when Dr. Teresa Dawn was talking through her cycle, she's mentioned the technique called soothing rhythm breathing. Now, soothing rhythm breathing is slightly different to other breathing techniques in the sense that it's not aiming to relax you to the extent that you might be able to go to sleep. It's aiming to calm down the body's physiology. So actually it's in an optimal position to be able to think clearly, make decisions and problem solve. Because what we know is that when the threat system is activated, actually those pathways in the brain between our logical thinking mind and our emotional mind are switched off. It's impossible, as we all know, when we're in the real moment of threat to be able to think really, really clearly. And actually, evolutionarily, that's quite helpful, because if we were faced with that lion or saber-toothed tiger, being able to think about actually how big are his paws, how fast can he run, does he look hungry? Actually, if we thought about all of those things, it probably would be too late. So we want that instinctiveness to kick in certain situations, but actually there's other situations where actually we want to be able to calm our mind and body, so actually we can think about whether first of all identify the thoughts that we're having, and then secondly be able to think about how helpful and accurate they are in any situation. So we can use our breath to be able to tap into that soothing system. As Teresa mentioned, it's not going to solve anything, it's not going to get rid of the threat, but actually it's going to get you into the mindset so that you can actually think about what you want and need to do, and actually maybe open up those doors to be able to apply some of these compassion skills that we're talking about. So I'm going to show you a short video by Dr. Alan Watkins, who actually demonstrates how this soothing rhythm breathing can work. And then I am going to talk you through the exercise myself so that you can have a go at it. So bear me 1 second.
This can learn with no training before how to control its physiology. You do not need to be
As practitioners, we can be tempted to try to move the treatment along as quickly as possible. But it's our job to make sure the client can soothe and self-regulate before approaching shame-based trauma memories. We can't expect a threat-focused mind to come up with wise insights and knowledge. Additionally, there's a specific knowledge base that clients need before we dive into their work.
turn your chair around a bit if you like.
You just pull it back.
Chris can look. With no training before, how to control his physiology. You do not need to be a, sorry Neil, a yogic master. There we go. Which ear are we on? This one. Right, if you just hold that. Turn your chair around a bit if you like. Just turn your chair around a bit so you can see the screen noisy. So exactly as before. Is he still alive? Yeah. So we'll start recording. So again, just picking up each heartbeat. And so again, the software is measuring the distance between each heartbeat and calculating his heart rate. Now, because he's just come out of the audience and walked up to the stage, he's going about 90 miles an hour. Just excitement of being at the front here. So if you want to control your physiology, this isn't years and years and months of practice. This isn't, you don't have to be a yogic master to control your physiology. You just have to know exactly what to do. Right? So we're now going to show Chris exactly, Neil, exactly what to do. Mental block. So over here is a breath pacer. So when that goes up, I want you to breathe in. When that goes down, I want you to breathe out. At the bottom, there's a hold, so wait for it. Don't go too soon. Ready? And a long, slow. Okay, wait for it. A long, slow. You can follow this in the room if you want. Just breathe in this rhythmic fashion. So nice rhythmic breathing. So long breath in and a long, slow breath out. Okay, so I'll leave Neil to do that and I'll carry on talking to you guys. So of all the things that you can do to get your physiology under control, there are many, many things. But the start point is to do something that you can get conscious control over. And you can get conscious control over your breathing. Now, there are 12 different things, different aspects of your breath that you can regulate. 12 different aspects. So when you go to classes, whether it's singing, sports, fighter pilots, all sorts of things, they'll talk to you about breathing and, breath practice, yoga, but what are they teaching you? So, for example, there's a yogic practice where they teach you alternate nostril breathing. That's kind of interesting. But in my view, that's number 9 on the list of priorities, okay, of the 12. The single most important thing is rhythm, which is what this is training. So we've seen that this measures the level of coherence in Neil's system. So when he's in complete chaos, he's down here in the red. And just with a bit of guidance, in less than or about a minute, he's up and into the coherent green. He is the yogic master. Neil brackets Yoda, right? Okay, no. So you can see the physiology has changed from this erratic to this coherent waveform in less than a minute when you know what to do. So of all the things in your breathing that you can do, if you start to control the rhythm of the breath, that will start to change the physiology, just as you've seen. Right? And you will start to become more coherent. So his frontal lobe will work better now than at the beginning of this trace when his physiology was erratic. You all see the difference? And even though the average heart rate is about the same during that period and during this period, the heart rate is the same, but the pattern is different. So when you change that pattern, you're basically sending better quality fuel from the heart to the brain, and the brain's going to work better. Right? And when the brain works better, you're more perceptive, you're more insightful, you're more clear thinking. You can understand how to problem solve. That's one of the other speakers say, you have to figure out when things go wrong, what am I going to do about this? Well, if your brain's inhibited, you probably won't come up with the idea or the right answer. But if you've got your brain switched on, you've got a much better chance.
So sorry about the beginning of that, but hopefully you were able to pick up enough to show on those graphs actually a demonstration about how when we breathe regularly, the effect that then that can have on the brain. So I just showed you a short clip of that TED Talk, but below at the bottom of the slide here are the links to part 1 and part 2 of the TED Talk called How to Be Brilliant Every Day. And if you do have the time, it might be really helpful to have a listen to that, to really get a good understanding about how the physiology can impact on the way that our brain is working. So what I'd like to do now is I'm just going to talk you through the soothing rhythm breathing exercise, just for you to get a feel of it yourself. Again, like everything, it does require some practice. So I will just give you a short version today, and I'd encourage you to go away and have a go at doing that yourself. So I'd invite you to get into a comfortable position, to place both your feet flat on the floor, about a shoulder width apart, and rest your hands on your legs. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so, or look down on the floor, or just fix on a spot around the room. Allow yourself to have a relaxed, gentle facial expression, maybe even a slight smile. Now I'd like to invite you to gently focus on your breath. As you breathe, try to allow the air to come from into your diaphragm, which is the V, upside down V at the bottom of your rib cage. Feel your diaphragm, that area under your rib, move as you breathe in and out. Just notice your breathing and play a little bit of an experiment. Breathe a little faster or a little slower until you find a pattern that for you seems to be your own soothing, comforting rhythm. Again, this will be different for everybody. So it's like you're checking in, linking up with the rhythm of your own body that is calming and soothing for you. You usually find that your breathing is slightly slower and deeper than normal when we're breathing like this. The breath is about 3 seconds, hold, and take 3 seconds for the out breath. Ensure that the breaths in and out are smooth and even. If you're noticing a bit too quickly or collapsing the breath out, notice that you're doing so. Just try to calm that breathing down into a soothing rhythm breathing. Just spend a few minutes focusing on our breathing. Noticing the breath coming down into the diaphragm, your diaphragm lifting and the air moving out through your nose. Sometimes it can help to focus on the point just inside the nose where the air enters. So in through your mouth and out from your nose. In through your mouth and out through your nose. Just focus on that for a few seconds. Now let's just ground ourselves to the present moment. Turn your attention to your body, sensing the weight of your body resting on the chair and the floor underneath you. Allowing yourself to feel held and supported, coming to rest in the present moment. Remember that it's perfectly okay for your mind to wander. Simply notice that it's happening with curiosity about where your mind has gone. Congratulate yourself for noticing, and then gently guide your attention back to your body. Just sense the flow of air coming in and out of your nostrils. Just observing, not trying to change, just allowing things to be as they are. If focusing on your breathing is a bit difficult, because for some people actually it is, then allow your attention to rest on an object. Find something you like to hold, such as a smooth stone or a soft ball, something that gives you the feeling of gentleness and calmness. Now, as you focus on your breathing, focus on that object that you're holding, how it feels in your hands, resting your gaze on the object as best you can, staying with the sensations of holding it in your hand. So just noticing the breathing in through your mouth and out through your nose. In through your mouth and out through your nose at your own soothing, comforting rhythm. When you feel ready, slowly open your eyes and bring yourself back to the present moment. Maybe have a stretch, take a deep breath to prepare yourself to carry on with the day in this presentation. So that's just a demonstration of the soothing rhythm breathing. So to recap, it's about counting rhythmically, finding your own rhythm, because that will differ for everybody, and practice. It does take a lot of practice to get the benefits and actually find what works for you. This can be used anytime, anywhere. It's not about relaxing your body, so you're not going to fall asleep. So whether you're on a shift, whether you're at home with the children, it's about regulating our physiology so that our brain can function better. So it can just be used whenever you feel, whenever you notice the stress levels rising or any unwanted emotion coming in for you. Just take a few minutes to regulate the breath and see how you find it. I'm going to move on, pass you back over to Ruth now, who's going to talk a little bit more about grounding techniques.
Okay, so thank you, Catherine. Hopefully everybody's brain now is feeling soothed, and we're going to have a look at some more tools that you can use. These will help you to build compassion with yourself, and as you're discovering, these will help you to get your brain out of that threat system, and then hopefully that will have you lead to you feeling less anxious and stressed, and be able to focus on what's important to you and what's productive as well. So grounding techniques are used when you're feeling anxious or having negative thoughts. So sometimes we have a lot of time on our hands at the moment, and sometimes we feel really rushed, and often then we have a lot of negative thoughts. We might be ruminating about the past or worrying very much about the future at the moment. So these techniques, as we've said, will ground you. And the important thing here is that they bring you back into the present. So it's not compassionate to leave your brain to focus on negative thoughts. But if you can bring yourself back into the here and now, you'll feel calmer and then able to move on to those productive activities and problem solving. So moving on, we're going to have a look at first technique is to work out if you are ruminating, dwelling on the past or negative things that have happened, or am I problem solving? So sometimes our thinking is helpful, but it's difficult to separate out the two. Ruminating is what we do when we're stressed, isn't compassionate. Problem solving is what we can do when our brain is calm, and it's a compassionate thing to do for ourselves. So what I'd invite you to do is to follow this 2-minute rule. And this has 3 steps to it. So first of all, if you wonder if you're ruminating and you're just thinking negatively about things, allow yourself to continue with that same thinking for 2 more minutes. At the end of those 2 minutes, then you need to ask yourself the 3 questions. And these are: 1, have I made any progress towards solving a problem? So have I worked out something about the problem? Do I feel like I'm nearer to solving it? Number 2, do I understand something about the problem or my feelings about it that I haven't understood before? And 3, do I now feel less stressed or less self-critical than before I started thinking about it? And if the answer to any of these questions is no, then you're probably ruminating. You're probably not being compassionate with yourself, and you need to take some steps now to distract your brain away from this pattern of thinking. Okay, so once you've realized that you're ruminating and not problem solving, then what do you do next? So if we move on, one thing that we can think about next is actually, is this something I can actually solve? So sometimes we spend our time thinking about things that we can't really have an impact on. And this diagram just gives us a quick way to think about whether the things we're worrying about are actually solvable. So the circle of influence gives us 3 different zones. So the yellow circle, the circle of influence, is the part that we have some control over. Outside of that area are the things that are the circle of concern. And in here are the things that we can do nothing about. So currently a lot of our stress and anxiety is probably because of so much control in how we live our lives at the moment, in which we have no say. And actually those things often at the moment we can't have an impact on, and they belong in the circle of concern. And in this area is maybe something that we shouldn't spend so much time on. So when we get caught up in ranting and raving about what's going on and really angry and distressed about it, actually if there's nothing we can do, it's not compassionate for us to keep focusing on that area. The circle of control in the middle, however, is a bit that we have full control over. So if you pause for a moment and think about your life, actually there's probably not a lot in that circle. It's you and what you do and what you think. And maybe if you've got really young children, you have some control, but never completely. And so there's a circle of influence will always be what involves other people maybe close to us, where we can have some influence over them and what happens, but we can never have full control over other people either. So it might be helpful just to pause and recognize if you're ruminating over something you can do something about, or maybe it's something you need to just let go of because there's nothing you can do at the moment about it. So that's helpful, just to pause and think. If we move on, what we're going to do is help you to now direct your brain away from problems. So this technique is called attention control training, or the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, and it was briefly mentioned before. So I'd invite you now just to bring up a really small problem, a recent problem. I just want you to notice how you feel. You can close your eyes, just reflect on something small that maybe happened today, something that's getting on your nerves, maybe something in the news. Just pause and think about it. Just notice maybe you feel a bit of anxiety here in your chest, a little bit of feeling in your head as you think over and over it. Just allow yourself to stay with ruminating. Now, what I want you to do is open your eyes and look around your room that you're in at the moment. I want you to notice the colours of the things around you. So have a look at the shades of things. So you might have red, see dark pink, pale yellow. Go into the detail of those different colours. Have a look at the shape of the objects and really focus and notice the little details and little changes in tone and colour. Say them to yourself in your head. And now what I want you to do is just come back to that problem and just notice where you had that feeling before. Is it still there? Maybe you've noticed it's gone down a little bit. So I want you to come back to the problem and just think about it again. Go back over it. What is it about it that's getting to you? What happened? Just reconnect and notice how you feel. Maybe feel a little bit more anxiety again. Just close your eyes and connect with it. Okay. And so moving on to the next step, I want you to open your eyes now. And I would like you to, if Kat, you could just click on the next one. Notice 4 things you can feel. So just notice the chair you're sitting on. Can you feel your clothes? Can you feel the seams on your clothes? Can you feel a breeze on your skin? Just notice what your hand's touching. What does that feel like, the material maybe? Okay. And now just come back to that feeling you had, the anxiety, wherever that was in your body. Has that gone down a little bit? Just notice. Okay. So hopefully you've noticed that when you distract yourself, actually coming back into your body, your anxiety's gone down a little bit. So this is a really quick, brief, short technique, and it's just to distract your brain. So your brain is a bit like a 2-year-old. It's going over and over these problems. If you can just direct it, oh, what's that over there? Or, oh, what's that I can feel? Your brain will really easily follow. And it just helps to bring down your anxiety briefly for long enough for you to change direction and go and do something soothing, or to turn and do some problem solving instead. So the other 3, 2, 1s of these, if Kat, you could just click on the next one, you can use it for the things that you can hear. So you might pause, just notice what you hear around you or maybe inside of your body. 2 things that you can smell. These are getting more and more tricky and challenging. And finally, 1 thing that you can taste. And if your brain is really determined to ruminate, you can work your way down all of those at once. So 5 things you can see, 4 you can feel, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. It will really challenge your brain. And by the end of that, hopefully, those anxiety levels have come down enough so you can start to take control of your brain and redirect it. Okay. So, these techniques work briefly. Don't try and stay with them for too long. They are just about redirecting yourself. And so, I think just for the next slide, Kat, just to see the next part. Sorry, we just go back. Okay. Once you've done this, the next step might be for you to go and do some problem solving. Go and sit down, think about what you can actively do, and if you need any support or help with the problem that you're worrying about. So that's the end of today. We'd really encourage you to try out these techniques and practice them. Be compassionate. If you're not finding them easy, welcome to the human race. Don't give up though. Keep trying them, and maybe try them when you're not really anxious, because if you try them when you're a bit calmer and just practice them, then they're much more likely to work. And just to not give up and keep going with this. So next session we're going to come back, and we've given you a taster already. Catherine's going to go through an exercise, another self-soothing exercise to build on compassion. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Hello and welcome back to the final part of our compassion focused therapy workshops. So today we're going to continue to build upon some of the exercises to help you with being more compassionate to yourself. We're going to draw more upon picking on when and how we might want to use the skills that we've covered, and then we'll just pull it together with a summary and some resources for you at the end. So we're going to start off by thinking about creating your perfect nurturer. So this is a way of tapping into that green soothing zone that we've spoken about before. So if you could imagine or create somebody who would capture everything you want from somebody who's totally focused on you. So they are your champion, they're alongside you, they're championing you, they're rooting for you. What qualities would they have? Imagine that you were the sole focus of their attention. They knew you better than anybody else. They could read your mind, but they had your best welfare in mind the whole of the time. So when we experience compassion from other people, as much as sometimes those compliments can feel uncomfortable, when we actually genuinely feel that somebody else cares about us, it triggers a real positive sense in our soothing and taps into that soothing system. It has a really positive effect on us. And there are systems in the brain that are really, really responsive to this kindness from others. And actually what we want to do is in this exercise is we want to be able to deliberately trigger those systems and that positive feeling of being soothed and secure. And often we do look to other people to provide this for us, and that is fine. We're not looking at this to replace other people, but actually sometimes others aren't available to give us what we need, or sometimes actually some people don't have those people in their lives to be able to give that to them. So not only does this mean that we're able to tap into that soothing system ourselves, but actually it might make us feel more able to accept that kindness from other people, so that actually perhaps in the future we can forge those relationships that we need. So what we're trying to generate is that warm, soothed feeling that you can get inside. That may be a feeling that's not very familiar to some of us. You might not have feeling it very often. But we're thinking, and what we're thinking about is using an analogy with this, is that actually if you were training to play a sports game, you might well go to the gym and practice. It's not the same as playing the real game, but actually you're going to be building up muscles and stamina, preparing yourself for the real game. And I guess this is a little bit similar when we're creating our perfect nurture. It's not the same as other people, but it's about us practicing and being in a really good place to be able to receive that from ourselves or others. So if you think about creating this perfect nurture, then I want to invite you to, as we said, think about somebody being totally focused on you. You're the center of their attention, the center of their positivity. You're the only one that matters to them. Thoughts may come up for you like, oh, I don't deserve that. It feels uncomfortable. That's fine. That's normal. That's understandable. But one of the key things about our perfect nurture is actually that they're non-judgmental. So they take you for who you are. They don't judge about what the thoughts that you have about what you really like, about you being the self-critical voice. They just take you for what you are and who you are and what you do. So have a think about, you may want to close your eyes to do this, but think about an image that might come to your mind. It's your own personal creation, so it's your own idea, so everybody's are different. But when you think about being cared for, when you think about being soothed, what image comes to mind? Thinking about a calmness. So for some people that might be an inanimate object, they might be more human-like. It can be an animal or a fantasy character. It could be somebody from a film or something like that. There's no right or wrong whatsoever in this. It's just about any image that comes to your mind that you associate with being calmed and soothed. And again, that warmth feeling that Ruth has alluded to, talked about earlier. And some people just invent their own combination of all of these, or just their own picture. And what we're not looking for here, we're not trying to get a clear picture. We're just trying to tap into that feeling of calmness. And then thinking about this image, which some people do pick somebody they know. I guess that comes with the word of caution, because often if it's somebody we know, because they're human like us all, they're not going to be compassionate all of the time. And there may be times where they aren't able to give you what you need. Or if it's somebody that has perhaps passed away, sometimes our feelings of grief can get a bit mixed up in everything, and we lose and become detached from that calm feeling. So if you are able to choose kind of something unrelated to a specific person, that's often advised. So let's have a think a moment. So we've got an image, and think about the qualities that this image, person, this thing might have. So we've got to think about that they're superhuman. So they're complete, they're perfect, they're the superhuman. So they've got a deep commitment to you. So they want to help you cope. They want to help you feel better. They want to get rid of any of your suffering. They're strong, so they're not going to become overwhelmed. They remain with you while you stick it out. There's none of the kind of escape or the avoidance. They're there, they're strong, they can deal with whatever throws at them. They have wisdom. So they truly understand you. They truly understand what you're going through. And they truly understand the world around them. And they have that warmth. So they genuinely care about you. There's the kindness, the gentleness, the openness. And they just accept you, as we said, they're non-judgmental. They accept you for who you are and what you're doing, and they understand your struggles. So we want to bring to mind an image that has these qualities, that has those qualities of compassion. So your perfect nurturer is committed to you. They're strong. They've got wisdom. They've got warmth. They've got understanding, and they're accepting, and they're non-judgmental. Your champion, they're rooting for you by your sides. So I'm going to hand you over to Ruth now, who's going to sort of talk you through an exercise. So using the image that we've just sort of brought to mind and we thought about, Ruth's just going to talk you through an exercise to bring this to mind. There's no right or wrong with it. There's no need to have clarity with it. It's really about generating that feeling inside that you feel soothed and calmed with. Over to you, Ruth.
Okay, thank you. So for this exercise, I'd encourage you to make sure you're sitting in a place where you won't be disturbed, and you feel comfortable enough to close your eyes to do this. So first, just to sit down and just notice your breathing and just engage with soothing rhythm breathing. So just regularly breathing in and out, just calming your breathing down, and just relax your face. And gradually to bring to mind a calm place. This may now be the place where you wish to meet and create your perfect nurturing image. But you can choose to meet your image in any place that feels comfortable for you. The key is to create the feelings of being safe and soothed before you meet your perfect nurturer. So if you need to take some time in your pause and allow yourself to feel calm and ready to do this, and then rejoin the workshop. So first I want you to do is imagine your image appearing in your safe, calm place. They may be materializing from the mist, walking through the door, but picture them arriving. And then imagine them standing or sitting beside you. You may want to touch them or be held by them, and that's okay. But only allow your perfect nurturer to be with you in a way that you feel comfortable with and that helps you to feel safe and soothed. So to begin with, simply practice experiencing what it's like to focus on the feeling that another mind really values you and cares about you unconditionally. And now focus on your image, which is looking at you with great warmth, and imagine that they have all the following desires for you. That you be well, that you be happy, that you are free of suffering. And allow yourself to sit with and open up to these experiences of compassion in the knowledge that you can always rely on your perfect nurturer to offer you their commitment, strength, wisdom, and acceptance. You may notice that your mind wanders, perhaps to memories of times when people have not been compassionate towards you, and this is perfectly normal. Just gently bring your mind back to focusing attention on experiencing compassion from your nurturer. try to do this exercise for about 10 minutes and gently bring yourself back into the here and now. And you might want to jot down what you felt during this exercise if you're keeping a journal to note that. So encouraging you to do this briefly to begin with, just allow yourself to develop a really good, clear image of your perfect nurturer, and then to build on the feeling of being with them. And if you're distracted, it's okay, just bring yourself back and just stay curious about what this feels like when you're doing this exercise. Okay. So if you've tried this, when you're ready, just open your eyes and just come back into the room and just notice how you feel. So this is something we recommend that you try doing regularly. You make it an exercise to become a habit for you. And by building on this exercise and repeating it, it will help to build that sense of self-compassion for you, make it easier to do this. So I'm going to finish there, and then I'm going to pass you back over to Catherine again.
Thanks, Ree. So just adding on to that image, some of the things that might want to go through your mind is thinking about the things that your perfect nurturer might be saying to you in times of difficulty, and thinking about the tone that they may be talking to you in. So linking back to Ruth earlier when she was talking about that critical teacher versus that compassionate teacher, actually how might your perfect nurturer, who is rooting for you, who is your champion, how might they be talking to you? What sort of words might they be saying? People come up with things like, you can do it, you're doing your best, keep on trying, you've done this before. So all of those kind of statements and that dialogue, that is probably quite different to the critical dialogue that we're very used to. So then moving on to think about stress management and thinking about how do we sort of pulling all of the things that Ruth and I have spoken to together, really. So it can be helpful to think about our mood in terms of thermometer. And thinking about on this side, what are our the warning signs that we're beginning to get anxious, or that our mood is beginning to dip. So what are the signs that your threat system is being activated? And they can be changes in our physiology, so an increase in heart rate, noticing our breathing going quicker, our clammy hands, racing thoughts. Or they can be more kind of that slowed down, lack of motivation, feeling of dread in the stomach, feeling very lethargic and heavy. So it's thinking about, actually for you, what are your signs that you are in that threat system? Because actually, until we realise we're there, it's really hard to do anything about it. What sort of things might be going through your mind when you notice those what ifs are coming in? So thinking back to Ruth's ruminating or problem solving, actually, are you having have you had continuous what if thoughts and not made any progress with that? Are you thinking about the worst case scenario? Are you focusing on memories from the past? So really tapping into what goes on for you when you are in that threat system and what it feels like. And that will be different for all of us. And so then once we've noticed those signs, we've noticed where we're at, we've noticed that our threat system is firing away, what can I cope? So what can I do to cope? So we've got numerous things that we've covered today. We've got the soothing within breathing, using our breath to change our physiology. We've got our noticing that you're, working at, am I ruminating or am I problem solving? We've got the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding techniques, bringing your mind back into present moment. A lot of the time at the moment with the COVID-19, our brains are very much focused in the future about what might happen. What am I meant to do? What's the right thing to do? Actually bringing yourself back to the present moment can be really helpful. And then we've got drawing upon our perfect natura. So drawing to mind that image that makes you feel calmed and soothed, and generating an alternative dialogue in your head in which you're spoken to with compassion, rather than that critical dialogue that a lot of us are always used to. It can also be really helpful to actually think in advance about certain situations or people or scenarios that are going to be particular triggers for us. So whether that be watching the news might be a trigger for you, whether that be knowing you've got to make a decision by a certain deadline. Maybe it's a certain time of day, so the mornings are worse for you, or maybe it's later in the day. And actually, if we can be aware of those triggers, it might be that we can do something to change them, so limit the time that we spend watching the media, or sometimes actually just knowing that it's a trigger. So knowing why perhaps our threat system has been activated can be really helpful. Ruth, is there anything else you want to add to that slide?
No, I think that's covered, but we'll have a look at some of the tips as well next.
Okay, so moving on and handing over to Ruth for the tips for coping during the pandemic.
Okay, so just to sort of draw together what we've learned and how to continue with this compassionate approach for the future, these are some things that you might want to hold in mind. Is just recognise this situation is bound to cause anxiety and it won't always be in your control. And learning to accept that, going back to the circle of influence, and identify what things you can do. And so things that you can do for yourself about taking care of your body and your feelings. That's our responsibility to do. Notice when you're anxious and act. So distract your brain, redirect your attention to something active or problem solve. Again, avoid the news, TV and social media. If this distresses you, then it's not compassionate to keep watching. And in fact, sometimes these can be quite addictive, but what we're looking for is sort of, we're looking for the negative sometimes, and that's not healthy for us to do. So just to limit that at the moment. Get the facts, so go to reputable sources. If you do need information about COVID-19 and lockdown and what the rules are for you, things like the World Health Organization, your local council website, all have factual and useful information with advice. Keeping a journal of your thoughts and feelings, where it's just a place to reflect and park what's going on for you, can be really helpful. Remember to keep connecting with friends, family, and your community. That having that connection with people who feel nurturing and supportive is very important to do at the moment. Give yourself a routine and structure. It's really compassionate to give ourselves those things. They reduce our stress levels. When the daily life is really unstructured, it can cause a lot more anxiety for us. Exercise and get fresh air, and when you're outside, take time to notice everything around you. Do your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What do you notice? What do you hear, smell, feel? Just ground yourself in the present moment. Remember times in the past when you've struggled and how you got to this point, what helped you to get through in the past. Remind yourself of those skills that you already have. And if you're still really struggling and you find that your mood dips, or you have any thoughts of suicide or self-harm, that you seek support. You don't try to manage on your own. And so what we're going to do next is we will then show you some of the links as well later on, and the places to get help if you're struggling too.
So just as a summary then, our sort of take-home message, I guess, with the self-compassion is actually it's okay to not be okay. Acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. Calm the mind with the soothing rhythm breathing. Bring your attention to the present moment with those grounding techniques. Noticing when whether you're ruminating or problem solving, and call upon your perfect nurturer to help you to be kind to yourself. And remembering you can't pour from an empty beaker. And similarly, on an aeroplane, who do they ask to put on the oxygen mask first? About putting your oxygen mask on first so that actually you can then be there to help for others. So handing over to Ruth just to have a look at some of the resources available for you for further support.
Okay, so these final pages that we're going to go through are a collection of resources for managing at the moment. There's some useful websites with the links here. So I'd encourage you, if you found this helpful, some of the things such as Russ Harris as some useful approaches that we've drawn on today, and lots of tips. Soul at Mind are a local organisation as well that you might want to get in touch with. They have lots of support available at the moment, and their website's in the middle of the page. So just moving on, some more general resources that are freely available. There's some apps for calming, some resources for helping you to be more resilient, so managing distress. And Silent Recovery College is a local organisation that has resources on their website and offer support as well. You can talk to them. Psychology Tools and the Centre for Clinical Interventions have some really useful sheets as well on their websites that you can have a look at too. So moving on to the next one, in terms of practical help locally, these are local things that can support you at the moment. If you're struggling with day-to-day life because of the changes with COVID-19, the Hive supports people who are vulnerable with day-to-day living. Age UK can provide support, and the domestic abuse support contact locally is Safer Portsmouth. And there is also a local helpline from Hampshire if you need support at the moment. And there is a website Portsmouth has, it's Portsmouth City Council website with updates if you're living in the city. And then on the next slide, websites if you need support with children at the moment. So if your children are returning to school and you want to support them with any anxiety, or children are still at home, and this is how you can support them there. There's some really useful information on those websites. And then on the next slide, if you have thoughts of self-harm or any thoughts of suicide, then you must contact either your GP or out of hours. They have a telephone number, or you can call the NHS on 111. And if you feel at high risk, then please do call 999 or go to A&E. Hospital A&E is still open and they will still see you. If you feel like you need somebody to talk to, and it's not an emergency, there's the Samaritans, and there is also Calm, which is a support helpline, particularly for men. And also you can refer yourself to Talking Change if you need support but you don't feel at risk. And either you can call us on 0300 123 3934, but we also have a website, Talking Change, and you can also find us on Facebook, and you can refer to yourselves online. So please be really compassionate with yourself, and when you need help, do seek that help and come and contact us if you need to. So that concludes our workshop on a compassionate approach to the current times. We hope that this has been helpful, and really encourage you to come back to these and go through them again as much as you need to, and take your time with them. And we wish you all well and hope that you will continue to take good care of yourselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.